The brain is an extremely complex organ, as well as the nervous system as a whole. In every era, recognizing its importance, people have tried to compare it to something else, most often to sophisticated technical inventions that were considered cutting edge at the time. For example, Rene Descartes in the 17th century compared the brain to a mechanical pneumatic system containing various levers, gears, and vessels filled with gas. In the 19th century, the brain was likened to a telephone exchange, simply because it has structures resembling wires. It maintains communication between the center and the periphery, and it is filled with constant internal conversations. Today, we mostly compare the brain to a computer. This is an analogy that is easy to understand, although it is not entirely accurate. In our heads, there is something like a central processor, the higher areas of the cerebral cortex. These include regions responsible for thinking and decision making. For a central processor to function, it needs additional computing units located at the inputs and the output. In a computer, input devices include a keyboard, a microphone, and a video camera. All of them transmit signals inward to the processor. In humans, this role is played by the various sensory organs. Instead of a camera, we have eyes and the retina. Instead of a microphone, we have ears and cochlea. Or take memory units, for example. In a computer, there is working memory for tasks that must be handled here and now, and long term storage that reliably preserves information on a hard drive or its equivalent. We have the same distinction: short term and long term memory. Remembering that we put milk on the stove 2 minutes ago, and remembering how in the first grade we brought our teacher gladioli from the family garden are supported by different processes taking place at the level of individual nerve cells. The computer's power supply corresponds in our brain to the centers of sleep and wakefulness. Although this unit is not very complex by itself, if it fails, the computer will not work. Likewise, damage to these relatively small brain centers can cause a person to fall into a coma. The centers of needs play an enormous role in how our brain works. Modern computers, too, are capable of announcing their needs. The battery is running low. Plug me in. New mail has arrived. Take a look. Isn't it a time to update your antivirus software? It is easy to imagine a situation in which, upon hearing its owner enter the apartment, a laptop turns on and says, "Would you like to play a new shooter?" Or, "I've picked an interesting movie to match your preferences." What is the computer doing in this case? It is behaving proactively, imposing certain reactions on the user. You cannot simply ignore it. You must press yes button or no button. In the same way, a person cannot ignore, for example, a strong feeling of hunger. The brain demands a decision. In addition, both the computer and the brain have output devices, units directed outward. In a personal computer, these are a printer or a display. In our body, they are muscles and internal organs. When the brain does something, including searching for ways to satisfy a particular need, we move our arms and legs, while the heart, intestines, kidneys, and lungs work to ensure that all these movements are supplied with oxygen, glucose, and other necessities. All of this functions so that we can live long and, if possible, happily. If we dig a little deeper, we see that a computer is made up of microchips, while the brain consists of neurons and the auxiliary cells located between them, so called glial cells. Neurons are those very nerve cells whose damage we so often mention when talking about stress. Neurons and microchips represent roughly the same level of organization. Let's take a closer look at neurons. A nerve cell is a branching structure with a central part called the soma. The soma contains the nucleus and various organelles. From the central part extend two types of processes, dendrites and axons. Dendrite comes from word meaning branch, while axon comes from a word meaning axis. Dendrites are highly branched processes, usually several of them. They serve as the inputs of the neuron and receive information. They are like a call center that takes incoming calls from many different places. A neuron, however, always has only one axon. It carries signals to the next cells. These are the most important outgoing calls. As a result, neurons form chains and networks through which information is transmitted. Our memory, emotions, what we perceive in the external world, and the signals sent to muscles and internal organs, all of this exists in the form of electrical impulses propagating through neural networks. When we look at the first level of how the brain works, we see that the brain is an electrical machine. At this level, its resemblance to a computer is truly striking. We know that a computer uses a binary system in which everything the computer does is encoded by steps of electrical currents. Essentially, all information is represented as the numbers 1, the upper step, and 0, the lower step. It turns out that our brain uses a very similar principle, except that these steps are not rectangular, as in computer, but rather triangular. They are called action potentials, and they propagate along axons and dendrites. These impulses encode feelings, sensory experiences, thoughts, and future movements. The current steps are roughly the same in all parts of the brain. What matters is only the location where they arise. So, if one connects to the right area and delivers similar impulses, It is possible to induce, for example, euphoria, a hallucination, or make a person move a finger. This is precisely what specialists do when they fit patients with prosthetic limbs and sensory organs. If we begin to compare the brain with a computer at a deeper level, we encounter a rather humiliating picture. In a computing machine, the current steps just mentioned are generated at several billion per second, gigahertz. The working frequency of most neurons in our brain is roughly 50 to 100 hertz. This means that very little information is transmitted along each axon per unit of time. On top of that, it happens extremely slowly. Rather disappointing for one's own brain, isn't it? It gets worse. As physicists tell us, in computers, signals propagate at a speed of roughly half of the speed of light. Our maximum, by contrast, is about 100 to 120 meters per second. Converted into kilometers per hour, that is roughly 360 to 430 kilometers per hour. That is very little. For comparison, the average cruising speed of a Boeing is around 800 to 900 kilometers per hour. For example, we take a finished pie out of the oven and accidentally shift the hot baking dish. In a large creature like a human, by the time the impulse from the skin of the finger reaches the spinal cord, is processed there, and then returns back, a clear time delay appears, about 3/10 of a second. Along with the tasty pie, we predictably get a burn. If information traveled along our nerves at the speed of light, we would never burn ourselves at all. Our reaction would be so fast that the moment a finger touched the hot dish, the hand would immediately jerk away. But the speed of signal conduction in nerves is low, and the duration of pain processing in the spinal cord is relatively long, so the skin ends up damaged. Well, at least it doesn't turn into charcoal. Evolution honestly tried to create the fastest possible axons, but this is as far as it got. Even so, it is a victory because in primitive invertebrates, the speed of impulse conduction does not exceed 1 meter per second. Those creatures were far less fortunate.